The Graphic Histories Podcast.
I got bitten by a radioactive bug. I tried an experimental drug. Went up for a stroll on a gamma testing range. I found an enchanted hurricane. I made a serum that made me small. I modified the serum so it would make me tall. Radioactive isotope in my eyes. Dying alien helped me accessorize. I gained the proportion and strength of a spider. Now I'm invincible and I can fly. I lost my sight, my other senses were heightened. I'm gonna put on my pajamas and go fight crime.
Hey there, and welcome to the Graphic Histories Podcast. My name is André Mayette. I am your host. Big thanks to Uka the Mock for our theme song, Superpowers. And big thanks to you, gentle listener, for tuning in once again to another action-packed show. This is the second of our new weekly episodes in which, we've been able to get so many guests that it's now prudent for us to do a weekly program. I used to do it bi-weekly just because it was a lot of work to try to track down guests, but big thanks to, I guess I'll call him my producer. I mean, he kind of is somewhat. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Davin, but I can call you producer. Big thanks to Davin for helping out with that. And if you're not already, please listen to our podcast, the X-Rated X-Men Anime Review Show podcast, in which Davin and I watched the original X-Men cartoon from the 90s, chat about it. We've reached the end of that, so now we're going through some of the video games, some of the movies, having guests that are involved in the show on, and some other fun stuff to fill in the time before the new show comes out on Fox, which we're very excited about. But today's episode, I have Paris Alleyne as my guest. Now, Paris is a Toronto comic book. He started as colorist and then worked into the art world, and a really talented guy, really interesting stories. And as I talk to people on the show, I've come to, time is marching on, right? To quote the song from They Might Be Giants, time is marching on, and time is still marching on. And apologies for my terrible singing, but it is marching on. And as I talk to people like Paris, who are younger folk, younger than I anyway, he talks about things that have influenced him and how that came a little further along in my development. It's just, I'm going to have to get used to that as I get older, I guess, that the guests we'll be having on the show will have experiences that'll be monumental things to them that were big for me, but, that hit them at an age where it really defined them, or at least set them on a path that led them to where they were. So it's just interesting. Like he talks about in this episode, I think it's the first Spider-Man movie, which would have came out when I was a late high school guy. So yeah, it's just cool. Like it's neat, and it's actually interesting because you never know what's going to inspire someone, right? Like what movie, what book, what TV show, what anything that comes out in popular culture is going to get out there and someone's going to see and is going to influence them, or at least lead them on the path towards the career they have. So Paris has some great stories about what influenced him, and some stuff about growing up and his father. But I don't need to tell you about that. You're listening to the episode. So why don't you just go ahead and do that. One thing that's going on in my regular life that I've discovered is the show Reservation Dogs. If you're not watching it, I highly suggest it. It's by Sterling Harjo, who's, I believe, an Indigenous comedian. I learned about it through Mark Maron's podcast, which I'm a fan of. If you listen to this show, you can probably see some similarities between his show and mine, and I'm not hiding from that. I mean, it was an inspiration. I just dig his show so much, and I thought, why can't we do something like that for the comics world, or comics, sci-fi, nerd world? So that's me. That's the pocket I'm trying to fill. Hopefully, it's doing okay. It seems the show's doing well. As I mentioned, I think early on that we were going to try to mix things up a little bit, make sure we get this on a platform that'll make sure it gets out as many places as possible, and try to market it a little better. And I'm working on that because, it's a ton of fun. It's a great show, I think. And I'm really enjoying it. I'm glad that people that are listening are enjoying it too. But, check out Reservation Dogs. It's a show it's on Disney Plus, actually. The entire series is on there. There's only 3 seasons. But it follows a group of kids growing up on a reservation in the States. And I think it has a bunch of Canadian actors. I think it's filmed maybe in Canada, because there's quite a few recognizable Indigenous actors on the show that I recognize from some Canadian shows here and there. But it's really good. It's a fantastic little show with some important stuff to say about, marginalized group of people that you probably don't think about as often as you should, unless you're part of that community. And, Canada has a complicated history with our Indigenous people as well, but the States do too. And it does follow, what life is like for these kids growing up in this area and the culture and the society. And it's painfully funny sometimes. There's an actor, I had to look up his name, but he plays sort of a spirit guide to one of the kids. And he is fucking hilarious. He's quite possibly one of the... I haven't laughed harder than I think I have watching him on screen. I don't know what about him. He's just very charismatic, but he's so funny. But it's a really good show. I highly suggest it. Check it out. And I think you might enjoy it, because I certainly do. Anyway, let's get to my talk today with Paris Alleyne. Great conversation, really cool guy, and doing some amazing work, beautiful art out there, beautiful art, and a really fun conversation. So, without much further ado, let's get into my talk with Paris Alleyne.
Yeah, just one of the suburbs right outside of Toronto.
Oh yeah, what one?
Oh, from a start.
Oh, nice. I actually was just there a few weeks ago at the start of December, and I was in Toronto proper, but I was staying with a buddy in Alliston, and surprised how
Oh, okay.
how big and elaborate all of the extra towns around Toronto are. There's so many small communities and bigger ones all around, like that are just outside of it. That it was really cool because he lent me his car one day to go do some errands, and so I kind of got to go check out a bunch of stuff on my way through, and it was neat. It's sprawling. I don't know how you guys manage.
It is a complicated public transit system. Because living in the city, you don't really drive. So getting outside of the city, again, it can be complicated.
So growing up, were comics always a thing for you? Is that something you fell into at a young age?
Um, it's actually kind of funny because when I was like a kid, um, I didn't get into comics on my own. Like my dad, he bought some comics for himself. My dad is really big into comics,
Oh, really?
and then when I was like 4 years old, my dad gave me my first comic, uh, which was a Superman comic. It was the first appearance of the Superman blue costume. Yeah,
Is
and yeah, so I just like I poured over it. I couldn't even read it, but I just looked at the pictures like every single day.
is that when he had the electric?
And I
Like when
still
he...
have it.
Oh, really? That's awesome. Is that
Yeah,
what... Yeah, man. It's funny. I'm feeling old now. Like I'm 38, but I remember when that book came out, and it was such a like, I wouldn't say it's controversial, but like them changing Superman's costume into something that was incredibly like early 2000s or late 90s, I guess it would have been when that came out probably. Was like just such a...
yeah, it was 97.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah. That's really funny. Like I love talking to folks that are a little younger that are growing up in the comics world, because like some of their seminal comic memories are like are things that, like, if you've been around comics for a long time, don't seem like it's that long ago, but it really was. Like I was talking to someone a while ago who was like, "Oh, when Batman got his back broken and there was like a new Batman," and I was like, "Yeah, I guess that was a while ago now, wasn't it?" Like it's comics kind of a way of like kind of slipping away when it takes back of trying to find benchmarks in time.
Yeah.
So was it the
But I
art?
remember.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it was really like one of the only things that seemed like I had. Like I don't remember. Like I remember like the first books I would read when I was like a little kid, but like out of like the books where it was like, hey, let's like get you better at reading. This was the only thing I had that was like at an advanced level. And again, I wasn't even trying. I didn't even try to read it until like years later. I just looked at the pictures and I was so into it. And I no, I loved it. And I think like probably different than other children. I cherished it. Like I kept it in like really good quality. Um, like again, like I have it on my shelf. Uh, like still in its bag and board. And like I've always, every now and then I'll pull it out and like flip through it, and like it was the originator.
That's awesome.
But after that, I didn't actually really read comics much for years. Um, Then when I was maybe like 12 years old, I remember really for no reason at all. It seemed like in my mind it's a lot more cinematic than it actually is. But I remember being at my grandparents' house and it was raining, and I feel like and I was watching Spider-Man 1. Um and I remember like, it was like I was the only person in the house, even though that was no way that was the case. But it feels like I was the only one there. And and there was a piece of paper on the table I was sitting at, and I saw a pencil, and I was like, all right, why not? So then I drew a Spider-Man drawing, and it like cut off on the knees because I didn't like I wasn't really thinking of the whole image. I started drawing like the mask, and then I just kind of kept going with it. And I was like the first image I remember like really drawing for myself, and I was like, oh, that was fun. And my grandmother came in. She's like, "Oh, you got to try doing this. Got to try doing that." And like, she's giving me a bunch of advice. Now I realize, doing it professionally, all of the advice terrible. Um, but
Grandma wasn't
I
giving
realized at
seminal
that point I was
form
like,
advice. That's hilarious.
yeah, like clearly she wasn't like an actual, she was an artist. But um, then when I got a little like maybe like a few months later, I remember going like the dentist, and they had like give like stickers and everything out. And I remember seeing some Spider-Man stickers, and I like sneakily grabbed more than just one. Uh, and then I went home and I would draw the stickers. And from then on, I got curious about what the actual comic was. Like, obviously, I knew Spider-Man, but I was like, what is this book from? Like, what is this? And it turned out it was from Ultimate Spider-Man. Um, and like some of them were covers, others were just like pages. And so then I went out and I bought my first comic for myself, and it was on Ultimate Spider-Man issue 12 and 13. It was like a double issue. It's one where Spider-Man tells Mary Jane he's Spider-Man.
Right.
He also fights the Enforcers in issue 12. But yeah, it's like from then on, I went through it. I just was drawing the pages, and that comic I did not keep in nearly as good condition. Uh, like going over like tracing things, and like honestly, I cut some images out so I could like have them isolated and draw that again. Mutilated that book.
Well, that's what you do with those early comics. I remember I kind of grasped onto those when they put out these Ultimate magazines that had like the Spider-Man and the X-Men and whatever, maybe the Ultimates when that came eventually all in one sort of book. So you kind of got like 3 issues in one bigger book, and that's sort of what was my inference into the Ultimate universe. But that's really neat that that was how you found your way in. So is Spider-Man like a seminal love then from that moment on?
Oh man, I love drawing Spider-Man. I love like I enjoy Spider-Man comics when they're good. Uh but more than anything, I love drawing Spider-Man. I think like it's not even like my favorite character is like Cassandra Cain Batgirl, but
Mhm.
Spider-Man is just hands down my favorite thing to draw. And I like with the popularity with like the Spider-Verse movies, and then like online everyone was like a lot of people were coming up with their own like Spider-Man characters, Spider Sonas. And I realized it was like, oh, I felt like this was like my time. So I love drawing people's designs, and it just adds like a slight bit of variety because I love the posing, I love the fluidity of it. I love trying to always come up with something new because and I always tell people like I'll never draw like the same Spider-Man pose twice. I'm always trying to like do something different with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always a lot of fun.
His costume is particularly fun to draw. I must admit. I remember one time many years ago I was at a free comic book day event, like when I was probably I don't know quite a while ago now, and Darwin Cook was there, and he was drawing whatever people wanted. It was a Strange Adventures in Halifax. I'm in Nova Scotia, and I got him to draw Spider-Man, and I think it's up on my wall behind me. I don't know if you can see it, but I remember him maligning, saying that like Steve Ditko did the ultimate sort of curse on other writers or artists by making a costume that only he can draw properly. That's what he said. And I remember that kind of sticking out to me a little bit, which is funny, especially how much the costume has changed over the years. Like even just looking at some of your work through Marvel, I noticed you've drawn a few different versions of the Miles Morales costume as well.
No, yeah.
Yeah. Are they?
Um,
Is he back to the classic one, or is he still in that black and red kind of jumpsuit one? It's been a little while since I've
no,
read
he's
that
back in
issue.
his classic suit right now.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I really didn't like that jumpsuity one. I don't know.
Oh yeah, oh man, I don't know. I thought it was so fun and fresh. Yeah, I liked it when it was more like the pink than the red.
Yeah, I like the
Um,
red eyes. I thought that was cool and a cool addition because I was
hmm,
always a sucker for the Scarlet Spider costume, like back in the '90s, and then when they kind of updated it when they brought him back, I like that version of it as well. And it's reminded me a bit of that, which is kind of cool. But
yeah, I can see that.
yeah. So as you started draw, I love your cinematic story, by the way. I imagine like lightning. There's like a rainstorm. This is like the moment you draw the first Spider-Man that puts you on this sort of path. So you said your dad was a big fan. Was he like just like an avid collector, or did he just read sporadic comics, or did he have like a bunch in the house? Or
He it's funny because like being younger, like my dad was very organized with it.
Mhm.
So he only really bought Thor comics and he was really big into the Doom 2099.
Oh, nice.
So and he bought some like early static books.
Oh, cool.
So it's like really cool to say like because he's giving them to me. So it's like, oh cool, I have like static number one and uh a few of the other milestone books too. Um
Those are
but it
great.
was really like predominantly those. He had like some random Fantastic Fours. There's also there's some books he had where you can tell he just went to the store, saw a cover that he enjoyed, or it was like, oh, this is a pivotal issue, so we would grab that. So I have like the first appearance of like the armored spider costume.
Hmm.
Um, this is one Fantastic Four. I wish I remember the number, but I remember the cover super well. It's like where like the thing starts wearing like the helmet mask.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah, I remember that.
yeah, so like there's a lot of cool books that my dad had. Um, but like for him, honestly, it was like the big thing. Like he loved Doom 2099, uh, that and Thor. But really, the Doom was a big thing. My dad
Wow,
loves Doom.
that's super cool. It's not like the 29, like I love the Spider-Man 2099 books because I was a huge Spider-Man fan growing up, still am. And I thought his
Yeah,
costume was I love like of all the Spider-Man variations of those costumes, that original 2099 costume is probably one of my all-time favorites. Um,
yeah, same.
but yeah, that Doom book, it's funny. I don't hear people talk about it so much, but I know like Warren Ellis and a few other people that got to be big later got started on that book. I think he came to it later. I can't remember who initially started writing it, but I remember it was the art was beautiful and it was just such a cool version of the costume with the silver and the blue.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
that was really neat. Oh, cool. So
And
um, so do you have brothers and sisters? Like, were you the only kid in the house, or?
oh no, I have a younger brother who's like 10 years younger. A sister who's a year older.
Mhm.
Neither of them really were ever interested in comics or art. Um,
So
like my sister's a
you were
writer.
your dad's through line. That's why I glommed on
Oh,
you.
for sure.
Yeah, awesome.
Like well my dad's like he writes, my sister's also a writer,
Oh,
so
cool.
like they have that connection. My sister at one point brought up writing a comic and me illustrating it, and then I told her about the I guess split in general for like what writers get versus what artists get, and at that point she was like, forget
Oh, really? Is she a
it.
writer of
Oh yeah.
some renown? Like if and your father as well? Like what do they write?
She is a journalist at this point.
Oh, really?
um
Okay, well.
yeah, she has gone on and done, there's no, she's done a fair amount of things,
Cool.
but whatever.
Yeah.
Is it cooler than drawing comics? Definitely not.
Yeah, agreed. I guess depends on who you ask, but certainly in present company would consider that as such. So, well, that's cool. Was your dad a journalist as well?
Oh no, my dad actually he was a fiction writer.
Oh, cool.
Like and he's still like is he's yeah,
Oh, that's
that's his
very
thing.
cool. Awesome. Well, that's cool that you guys had that. He got you that conduit through comics growing up. Um, so what was the like the first comics you started working on? Was this like all like you mentioned you were probably what 12 or 13 when you started drawing?
Yeah, and it's like that was when it's when you're younger, you draw like figures on a white background.
Yeah.
um and then I think I was 13, I tried to draw my first comic. I I think it was like a character could grow his nails really, really long. And he would use them essentially to like like grab things. And it was like it was kind of like a 2099
Mhm.
universe. Um, and I think like in the first issue, even though it's like in the future, the first issue I have him time travel back to like the present. So like I tried to create a world and immediately gave up on it by like page five.
Do you remember what his name was? Like, what was the long nail guy's name?
No, I don't.
Oh
I
man, I'm
can
curious.
remember like I remember like from the drawings pretty well. But not I don't remember what it was called.
That's
Oh, that's funny.
hilarious. Very, very cool. I'd be curious to have like I wonder if you could get together like groups of writers or artists and anyone involved with comics. Like, do you know David Cutler? He's
Yeah.
yeah, he actually used to be my roommate years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. Coincidentally, when he went to St. FX in Antigonish, I was in high school, and we both worked at a store together. And then when he graduated, he ended up moving with me in Truro, which is where I still live. Yeah, and hanging out for a while. But I remember like the characters he would draw when he like did early comics and stuff. I'd be curious to have like a collection of just all of the early characters of artists or writers, or just see what how they line up to where their careers have gone, or how much it has influenced where they go in the industry further along. So
No, yeah. I mean, like, I know
yeah,
so many people, and we will talk about our first ideas where it's like, oh yeah, I loved this, which is why it was a rip off. My first comic was rip off of that.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, so when I was younger, consistently just like I'm gonna steal this thing from this thing and this thing, and here's my character. Was it subtle? Not at
Well, I mean, I think that's the same path for almost every artist. Like, I
all.
mean,
Yeah,
I just did some little indie comics. I've never done anything of merit, but like the stuff I draw when I was younger was all stuff like that was almost like I would take panels from comics that I liked and like found ways to make the stories work that I could redraw the panels, and then eventually work that way. I think almost every artist probably has a similar story. It definitely comes from,
no, for sure.
aping the artists you liked or the comics you liked. So
Yeah.
were you pursuing art now in school at this point? Like, were you going to continue on with this? Did you envision that you'd be doing comics one day?
Well, like when I was in high school, I realized like at age like 15,
Hmm.
um, I realized I was like somebody has to draw comics. Like they're made, and I guess I never thought about that somebody had to be drawing them. So at which point I realized I'm like, oh, there's an artist on this book. Well, I want to do that. And at 15, I decided at this point, I'm like, this is my life now.
That's awesome.
Which like I think it was great at that point to like have a clear direction, but it was unfortunate because I also just stopped trying with my other like school subjects, and I was in 10th grade, so 11th grade and 12th, it was like yeah, and I know my parents were like, all right, so art great, but other things you still need to like keep them up. I'm like, do I though? uh, but yeah, so graduated and went to college for like art, and it was like great too because like when I was actually in high school, there was a lot of other people, like other kids there who were like they were also really into art,
Mhm.
and it was nice to because it felt like like my first like little artist community, um, and like Jamal Campbell, who is he just finished drawing Superman.
Mhm.
He and I went to high school together,
Oh, cool.
uh, and I know like him and I, it was consistently like all right, like I drew this, really cool, and he's gonna draw this, it's really cool. I'm like, all right, well, I'm gonna try to up it. He's gonna try to up it, and because we were coming from like such like different artistic backgrounds, there's like the work was so wildly different. Um, so it was like, well, how do I try to top something that, or how do I try to like make this like as good as I can, while also trying not to, I guess, like encroach too much on what he's doing, and then like a similar thing. Um, but in college it's kind of like the same thing, it's realizing like, oh wow, there's everybody else here is also like really good. um well, how do I try to stand out, like how do I uh well also try, because you try not to, I guess, be trapped in the idea that you're not as good as somebody else, so like what's the point? I know a lot of other people who had that mentality where it's like, oh, I'm not as good as this person, so why bother trying? Because I always had the idea that it's like I'm going to be better than I was yesterday. So I'm like, keep working, keep working.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's the right attitude. They're and comics are so like I always talk about this whenever I'm doing any kind of a chat with kids or something. Sometimes the library will have me talk about comics or other stuff with them. And I always say, like, don't like that's you're right, that is a trap that you'll never get out of. Because there's so many artists out there that do comics that you if you were like to think conventionally, everyone needs to look like Mark Bagley or Jack Kirby or something. It's like there's so many different cool, very unique artists out there. Like Humberto Ramos is an example I use a lot. Like you look at his stuff and you're like, conventionally, you may not have think like this guy's art is so wildly different than anything else, but then you're like, but it works. Like it's cool. You just find your pocket and work within it, right?
yeah, and I think like I think it's so cool nowadays how varied art styles get in
Mm.
like mainstream comics. I
Yeah.
mean, like obviously you can have the conversation about like indie books, but like they've always been like very varied.
Hmm.
So now seeing that like you can have books at like Marvel and DC and Image that are so like they don't have like the house style nearly as much as it used to be.
Mm.
I think I don't know. I love the way that that's moved.
Mm.
You get to see so many people, so many different artistic voices coming in and doing their thing.
Yeah, it just makes for more unique and interesting comics, right? I mean, if everything looks exactly the same, like, there's certain something to be said about the old style when everything was similar-ish, between your Infertinos and all that stuff. But yeah, like now you can just grab any book and to see such wildly different designs and like graphics and I don't know, it just makes for a much more interesting industry, I find.
No, I definitely agree.
Yeah, that's awesome. So in art school, so your parents were cool with you going into comics? Like I know they mentioned you had to do okay in your studies, but they were supportive of a career in art being your goal.
They, I think they were cool with it. I don't like my father always saw it as he figured my sister and I were going to go into. He wanted us to like go into something that like we really loved.
Mhm.
Like he never wanted us just to get like I don't know, just like your regular job just to I don't know, like make money and get by.
Mhm.
He wanted us to go into something we were passionate about, which
Yeah.
is again why we did. And with my mom, I knew like she definitely questioned the art thing a bit more. I don't know, like my grandparents definitely did. They were like, "All right, so are you gonna be like an art teacher?" I'm like, "No, I'm gonna draw comics." They're like, "All right, yeah, but like a real job.
Yeah, how you gonna
I'm
make
gonna draw
money?
comics."
Oh,
And yeah, and at every point, it was always like, "Okay, cool. So you sure about this?" I'm like, "Yes, 100%."
wow.
Even at those points where it was like a little like maybe 95% or 90%, like still telling everybody 100% sure this is what it is. And
Yeah,
even now, uh, I'm doing it, and I tell people like it's nothing I've else ever wanted to do. I love this so much.
that's awesome. So, well, hey, it's like you're right about saying being that young and being that actualized is rare. And kind of a gift if you can find what you want to do that early in life and really work towards it. You're light years ahead of some people. Um, so
Yeah, I was lucky.
so oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, yeah, I was lucky.
Yeah, for sure. So like in art school, like when you went to school for that, like I'm sure it's all the basic art stuff like figure drawing and all that sort of stuff. Was there I guess like you're young enough that there probably was quite an acceptance in having a goal of comics in mind. Like sometimes I speak to older artists that like went through the industry when they were younger or went through art school and like they were like, I want to draw comics, and then all the art teachers like didn't take them seriously because that wasn't a serious medium for them. I suppose by the time you've gone through, the medium had become, popular enough or at least recognized enough by artistic types or at least their teachers that they would sort of recognize that and respect it in a different way.
Well, actually, like before I went to school, every art teacher I had was again, it's the same thing where it's like, all right, don't show them that stuff. Don't show them any of the comic stuff. Like, don't do any of that.
Hmm.
But I had the mentality of like, well, I want to do this, so obviously it's what I'm going to show. Uh, but yeah, no, actually, I went to the same school as David Color. Uh, and we went to school for like a sequential art program, so Comix.
Hmm.
So the whole program was for that. So like actually getting into the school was no problem.
No,
Uh,
excellent.
yeah, it was solid. It was great to initially be there and see it's like, okay, cool, everybody wants to do this. Like you don't have to worry about what your passion being taken seriously because everybody here I just share that same passion
Mm,
to an extent.
that's awesome. So once you finished school, what was the next step into getting into the industry?
Oh man, isn't that the question?
Well, who are your teachers at the school? Were there anybody that was in like I know Dave when he went through the some course in Toronto, I think Ty Templeton was one of his instructors, but I wasn't sure. Was that a similar program or is it something else?
Oh no, I mean it was the same program, but the instructors had like changed a fair bit at that point. Um, the Dave Ross was there, and he had like drawn some like Star Wars comics, I believe.
Hmm.
Um, and I think like some old school Marvel ones, but I don't really know too
Hmm.
much about any of those. Uh, but like after school, um, it was really throwing anything at the wall and hoping it sticks. Uh, so yeah, I was like looking on forums, so people who are looking for like to pay someone to draw like 5 pages. It was posting art constantly on like DeviantArt. Um,
Man, I
on
miss those. Is DeviantArt still a thing? But I don't think it gets used as much as it used to. I remember when that was like the end all be all for a lot of people, sort of getting out there, getting their stuff out there, and getting noticed, and people getting comics from it was so surprising to me. But it was so cool. It was such a great
yeah, no,
outlet.
it was such a big part of I guess like my younger years
Mhm.
in art, and like actually like maybe like 3 weeks ago I actually deactivated my DeviantArt account.
Oh, really?
Uh, and it was wild to go to it, and it was like account. It said like how old your account is, and it said like 15 years, and I was like, holy crap. Uh, but it was like posting on DeviantArt. It was just like I was going to the conventions, trying to get portfolio reviews, trying to like show your work around. Um,
How did those go for
and
you?
my graduating class, we also we started like a little like art group where we would every week we would someone would pick a character and then we would all draw that character
Oh,
just
cool.
like keep our like the us regularly drawing and the group expanded. Some people left, some people joined, and we actually like at one point in like I think the heyday of this group. It was like myself, it was like Jamal Campbell again, who like just finished drawing Superman. It was Dylan Burnett,
Oh, well.
who just finished his book Arcade Kings. Janoi Lindsay, who also has done a bunch of like Marvel and DC stuff at this point. It's like it was like a lot of like there's a lot of us who are currently in comics. Um, and it was like again like working as a group, doing that. It was great to like all of us get our workout.
Mhm.
So if someone like Jamal's work, they'd see the rest of us. Someone like Dylan's work, see the rest of us. Uh, and it slowly helped us like build our popularity. We'd go to conventions, we'd all sit together as a group, and then like people kind of started knowing us as the group. And then because the goal was always to do this to get professional work,
Mhm.
and then it's like the consistent networking as a group like this, it led to that. Um, so no, like I think Jamal was the first one out of us. Like he started doing covers for Marvel, and then did like a Prowler series pretty quickly.
Oh,
And
yeah.
like Dylan started working with Donnie Cates. And I know like Janoy and I kicked around and did like some indie stuff for a bit longer. And then I don't remember what Janoy's first name was, but he started working with Marvel. And then I was also like really big into coloring because I I liked my work colored. And when I was like on DeviantArt, sometimes people would color your work, and you couldn't rely on just hoping someone would like it.
Mhm.
So I practiced and I got better. So I practiced coloring other people's work so I could get better at it as well. So I started doing like some small things. He's like a colorist, and my friend John Lamb, who used to live in Toronto. I think now he's out in California. We always wanted to work together on something. So when he got his first Marvel gig, He asked me to come in and color it, and I was happy to, obviously. And then from that, I colored some more things with them. Colored like a Black Panther. I got a couple issues of that, and then some small things. Colored David Cutler, and then I talked to my editor, and I was like, "Hey, you do know I also am an illustrator." Uh, and
That's an important
um,
conversation. You don't want to get stuck in that pocket, right? Especially if you want to, do
oh,
other
that
things.
was such an important thing. It was like I didn't want to be just like seen as just a colorist.
Mm.
Which again, no problem with like coloring, but it was just not. I wanted more than just that. Uh, and yeah, so eventually they're like, all right, they kicked me like a one-page story, and then like I think I did a great job with it. And then like slowly it just got like bit by bit more and more. Then yeah, again, it's like consistent just posting online and talking to people and networking. Uh, it's just you're really helping get to where I am right now.
That's awesome. Very cool. What is working within the Marvel system like? Is it from what I've spoken to most people, it seems like it's a pretty great and sort of welcoming creative environment. Um,
At this point, I've actually done more with DC than I have with Marvel,
oh,
but
really?
yeah, like the Marvel stuff, like it's cool. I do enjoy um their like Dropbox type system
Hmm.
where like I don't know, I like the email where it's like, hey, you get to work on this, and then I feel I don't know, then when it's like, yeah, and you're going over and like all your items are there. It's like cool, I got my script, I got my references, thank you, awesome, just get to
Oh,
work.
it seems like a
Um,
much easier way of doing it than just having to like struggle to find your references and all that sort of stuff yourself.
yeah, it's my first thing I ask editors, I'm like, do you have the character references? Because I don't want to have to read like a bunch of books just to I don't know, hope to get enough angles of one character like for later on.
Mm.
So like the bits of work I've done, either like illustrating or coloring, it's been super helpful. And they've had like essentially everything I've needed. And my editors I've worked with have been like so good. So it's been really easy, even just like if they've missed a couple characters, I'm like, hey, cool, in the script we're asking for this person, but I don't know who that is. And
That's a
then
good
that hooked me up really quick.
that's a good point. I'd like to have an editor on here someday, because people forget about how important their roles are. They seem like they're sort of a gatekeeper, and in a way they are, but it's also their job to sort of make sure all the pieces are in place for everyone else to get their stuff done. So you have to be incredibly organized and also efficient in that way, especially working with artistic types because they're historically artsy types aren't usually the most um, organized sometimes. So it's
Yeah.
I mean, everyone's process is different, but I've met a lot of artists in my day, and a lot of them have unusual ways of doing things, and trying to make them fit within your system might be a bit of a bit of an issue here and there.
Yeah, I do my best to like I'm a pretty organized person.
Hmm.
Um so working with like my editors, I know like I like to even if I'm like if I'm given information on Friday and I'll start the project for like another like week or two, I will go through everything day one. I'm like, cool, I need to make sure that everything's here.
Hmm.
Just so when I do go into it, I have it. Also, I'll tell the editor now if anything's missing, just so that they can get it to me like essentially like they'll normally do it in like the same day. They're like, oh,
Oh.
sorry, maybe we missed that, like, or our file didn't finish uploading,
Hmm.
and super easy. But yeah, no, editors, really respect them in the way where it's like I'm an illustrator and I'm working with my editor and my writer, maybe my colorist if I'm not coloring myself. Uh, but then they are working with all of us and other books. Like, oh wow, they're just like probably just constantly sending emails, which I would hate.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. So, you mentioned you're doing more work for DC. I see you did some work for Static. That must have been kind of surreal to grow up with those comics and then eventually get to work on that.
Oh yeah, it was. I I got the message of asking me if I wanted to work on Static, and I was like, I was some friends, and I legitimately like my eyes like filled with tears. I was like, oh my god, I can't believe that I'm getting asked to do this. I can't believe it was real.
That's awesome.
Uh, and conveniently, we were like out. like just 2 doors down from where I lived at the time. So I was like, you guys need to wait here. I went upstairs and the whole like emails back and forth for like 20 minutes.
Mhm.
We got like sorted, and I went back down. I'm like, guys, I'm working on static. I called like my dad and my sister. Um, I couldn't believe it. Like so few people have actually worked on static.
Mhm.
Uh, um, but like I know so many people who like they love the cartoon. Like they grew up with it. Even the fact that like before the more recent comic run from Vidal and Nick Draper Ivy, before that people would like were still constantly like cosplaying, like conventions and everything. Like the show's been off the air for so many years,
Mhm. Mhm.
like it just made such an impact. Um, so getting the opportunity to do anything with this character who know I loved and so many people have loved, uh, really it felt like such an honor.
Yeah,
Um,
that's awesome.
and I still can't believe it.
Well, McDuffie's late, like Dwayne McDuffie's legacy for like that book specifically, I guess, and all the other milestone stuff. Like it's hard to put into words how much it means to some people, especially if you grew up in that era. Like, if I was super into the Batman cartoon, obviously, and then the Just League cartoons, and that kind of ran alongside them, which was so great.
Yeah.
And it was always sort of like, I know it was in the same continuity, but it was rarely addressed as such. But it was
Mhm.
very cool when it was. So that's amazing. Very, very cool. And with you work with Zdarsky as well. He must have been a joy to work with, was he? His stuff always seems like a blast.
Oh, it's funny because there are like he writes the way he talks.
Oh, really?
So his scripts are like, they have all the information there, but then every now and then just like his slide just jokes in for you to read, and it's like you don't know, you're not like he's not reading the script to you. So if you laugh, he never knows.
Yeah.
It is just like, hey, here's a small thing. Anyway, so you realize I'm like, okay, so he's writing them for himself. I get it. He's writing like jokes into his own scripts for himself. And like Jason Lowe as like illustrating those books. Like Jason and I are friends. Um, and like I'll I've this is probably not the best thing about me, but I will say yes to essentially working with a friend at any point. Uh, and like I've never really had a problem with it. But I have like I know the points I've taken like huge pay cuts where I'm like, my friend's working on it, so I'll do it too.
Well, I think it just goes to show like what your father kind of instilled in you, or you mentioned your parents instilled in you earlier, was that like, don't just do what you want to do for a paycheck, like do it because you love it. And you know, you may take a hit every once in a
Yeah,
while, but at least you're living a life that you love and working with people you want to work with.
yeah. I mean that's the biggest thing. It's I love working with I love working with my friends. I love collaborating with it. Like when Jason and I are working on Afterlift together, there is a few points where we were like drawing them together. Like sorry, like he was like working on some pages, and I was coloring pages, and we're at like the second cup was like having coffee together.
Mhm.
Uh, and it was really nice to work with like somebody who, like I knew what he wanted and knew what he was hoping for, and then it became super easy to work together. Because at this point, I've got like hundreds of pages that Jason's drawn. So by the end of it, there were like very few edits or notes. It was, he drew the script like exactly the way, like as intended, because we all know what Jason draws like. I colored it and I know what they're going for. Adding like my own flair and everything. Like, it was just like accepted. It was eventually like working with them. It became like super easy. And it was really nice to, I don't know, just like hang out and like talk and just work together. It was made work seem very much not like work.
That's important. It seems like Toronto has a cool little community of I've spoken to quite a few people lately. like Kalman and yourself, and I've talked to Dave before on the show. I've had Jason on, um, and Adam Gorham and some other folks I know that all seem to work without that area. So it seems like the community of artists, Ramon Perez as well, like that it seems like they have a really cool little community, which is neat in Toronto. Like it seems like if you're an artist
Yeah.
or at least a comic artist, you already have a pretty big built-in community in there.
Yeah, like all the people you named have had a hand in like my career. Like I know
Mm.
like Adam, when I was maybe uh 18 or 19, um I remember talking to him in a mall, uh and I was asking him, like for advice on what to do, how do I get my name out there? And he gave me a series of like editors to talk to, like a bunch of emails. It's like, talk to these people, show them your work. They can help get you in the right direction. Uh, and, I did as I was told, and I reached out to these people, and some of them, like, most of them didn't like work out at the time because I was 19. I didn't really know what I was doing.
Mm.
But some people did, took the opportunity to talk to me, to give me some notes of my work. And some of those editors, years later, we ended up working together.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And Kalman gave me my first like legitimate coloring job, coloring the Canuck series that he was relaunching. Um, and I know like Ramon, he and I like because I work at the Raid Studio.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, hell, I saw him yesterday.
He's a very nice guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's very cool. Yeah, no, I've always been a little jealous of that. It seems like the community in Toronto. We do have some folks out here that do work, like in Halifax. Like Ed Brisson lives here, the writer, and Jed
Oh yeah.
McKay.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
Jed McKay lives in around here as well. I think. Oh God, I'm blanking on his name. Um, the guy that drew Civil War. Why can't I think of his name? Anyway, he lives here as well. So there's sort of like there's a cool little community, and I know they have little drawing groups and stuff. But I got to get to one of those sometimes. I do miss being around other artist types when you get to those
Yeah.
events, and it
That
really
was
like charges you.
that was a big thing for me. Like I've always been big into the community side of it. Like I tell people a lot, like, I love comics and I love art, but I really love the comic like community. Um, so like the reason I moved to Toronto was because like I hated knowing that there were events going on
Mhm.
and either not being able to make it to them or having to leave like really early just to get home. Uh, so at a certain point, um, like my partner and I, like she just finished school and I was like, all right, well, let's go to Toronto. So we moved and um, oh, I've loved it. It's been so great. I love the community here. I love the fact that I can run into comic artists on the street.
Well, yeah, and especially when they have like the events, I imagine it's nice to be able to kind of go as a unit, but at least like when you're going to a convention or something, you're not just going to be surrounded by strangers. There's going to be tons of people around.
Yeah, like at this point, like whenever I go to any of the Toronto shows, I always tell people like, yeah, I'm going there to hopefully like sell some art and comics, but really I'm going to see my friends.
Hmm, that's
And the
awesome.
majority of people at the show, I get of like the professionals, I do consider them to be my friends. Like we hang out outside of the conventions, like it's not just talking about art and or tips and tricks. It's just the community aspect of it.
What's your process like? Are you digital or are you strictly hand drawn, or how does your style work?
At this point, I'm entirely digital.
Hmm. I've just
It
become that myself. I used to
Yeah,
I wouldn't say I was a traditionalist, but I was like, like I don't know if I could ever enjoy something more than this until I finally got like the iPad Pro with all the stuff and started using
yeah.
it. And oh my God, I can't like the just for speed, like for the amount of time you can save and how quickly you can do something instead of removing steps of the process. I,
It
I don't
yeah, it
want to see
was
original art go away, but I just for me it's like it's so much faster and
it
just
is
so much.
simply like the steps that get cut out
Yeah.
like that for me. Like it was the biggest part. Like I felt like I was never able to really get good at scanning my work.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
that was an art in itself. like just getting it scanned properly so that you could get it well enough that you can ink it and do all that sort of stuff, or color it rather and do all that sort of stuff. Like,
And then even so, it was like, okay, finally, this is looking good. And I'm like, damn, I forgot to erase the pencil on this one part.
mm,
All right, cool. Let me go in and like lighten that up a bit.
mm,
It was just so many steps. But now I go and turn the layer off and I'm done with it.
mm.
Easy. Move on.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't think it's one of those things that, I was like on the fence about it until I tried it. And then I was like, I'm definitely never going back. Like I dislike that I won't have like finished paper art to hand off to somebody or to sell, but I'm also like, I always felt bad about selling it anyway, because it just seemed like it was so much a part of me. But this way it's like, it's great. That's really cool. What do you use, like Procreate or one of those studios, or what do you do for that sort of stuff?
I feel like, sorry, I use a Clip Studio for all
Oh,
my illustrating. I use Photoshop for all my coloring.
nice.
Where because man, no matter how much I want to, I don't want to use Adobe products, but my God, the coloring comics in it just it's so intuitive for me at this point.
Hmm.
I have a hard time fully coloring something in Clip Studio.
Hmm.
But oh man, and Procreate, I there's a lot to it, but it doesn't have everything I need yet.
Yeah,
So maybe one day it will, but not yet.
I'm learning that as well because that's what I've been using. And just Adam actually is the one who suggested it to me, because I was watching him he came out to, they have a comic convention in New Brunswick every year called the East Coast Comic Expo.
Okay.
Nick Bradshaw's he's out of Moncton as well, so he's kind of one of the people that helps get it together. But Adam was there one year, and I was just watching him, and that's what sold me on it. I was watching him work on something. I think it was one of the covers for the Stranger Things Ninja Turtles thing he was doing, and just watching him work on it so cleanly with the tablet, I was like, I got to get one of those. And
Oh, I didn't know that he did those digitally.
yeah, I
Oh,
think, well, coloring anyway. I saw him coloring it or doing something with it, but I was like
oh,
that.
okay.
Yeah, that was enough and then he told me what it was, so then I went and picked it up and played with it. But you're right. It seems like every time I'm not sure how to do something in it, and I look it up, it's there. I just didn't know how to do it. So I'm finding a lot of stuff as I go along with it that it's certainly worth your time. But yeah, I mean, and I'm a graphic designer normally, so like I'm familiar. Obviously, Photoshop is something I use almost daily. So between those two, it feels like it gives you all the pieces you need to get all filled in.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
So what do you like? What is there a dream project you've yet to do that you would love to do?
Man, there's a few. Um, the simplest one, I would love to do a Spider-Man cover.
Mm.
I don't need to do the whole story. I would be satisfied if they just let me draw the cover. Um, I would love to draw a Cassandra Cain story, cover for me for Cassandra Cain. That's not enough. Let me do the whole Batgirl story. Um,
Is she still
and then
Batgirl in the
it's like,
comics as proper, or it's been a while since I read those comics?
oh yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
yeah. And beyond that, it's like, I have like some personal stories that at some point there will be time.
Something you like to kickstart or something down the road to publish your own stuff?
I don't even know. I love the fact that I can do all of the art.
Mm.
But I am just not the best writer.
No.
So it takes me take that step takes me the longest.
Yeah. Well, it's thankfully you have a lot of collaborators, so if you ever need to have someone else involved, I guess you have that option there. But
Yeah, so many people I know who've like offered to like, hey, if you want to bounce ideas off me, and I'm like, I do, but then I realize I don't want to take up so much of people's time. I get the offers there, but for some reason I want to take it.
well, you sound like me. People offer and you're like, well, I still don't want to put people out, even though.
Yeah.
Um, no, that's very cool. So, what's next? Like, what projects do you have on the go right now?
Right now I'm actually working like actually not even in comics. I took a slight break because I did that. I finished some in the summer. I did the Creed series. I did
Hmm.
some pages for that, and after doing like a set of covers. Um, so right now I'm actually working on this novel that a friend of a friend wrote, and I'm doing the illustrations for
Oh,
like the
cool.
prestige edition of it.
Oh, nice.
I think it's prestige edition. I'm actually not quite clear, but point is, again, I'm drawing like dragons and battle scenes, and I have a lot of fun doing that. But there's like comics. I have some cool covers coming up that I can't talk about yet,
Well, we can keep
but
an
I
eye
was
out for
about
that.
to, and I just suddenly remembered that NDAs are there, and they stand purely there to ruin my fun. But
Do you find it hard to keep within that? I mean, I imagine it's
oh my
easy.
god, yes.
Yeah. Um, I've talked to a few folks that are like, I can't talk like next month that it's be out or something like that. But then you're like, you kind of forget that there's, a whole system put in place to make sure that information doesn't get out early. So it's got to be a little tough to be working within those things and make sure you adhere to that.
Yeah, and there's some things, it's so cool. You get excited, you want to tell people, and that's exactly where I live. I live
Mm.
in the position where I'm excited about every project and I want to tell people, but I can't.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing it. And the book sounds really cool. Have you done fantasy or like stuff, sort of sorcery stuff before?
Not too much.
No.
So this has been a fun experimentation. It's very thankfully they were looking for like a comic book style. Um, so I'm now like I'm trying to like marry the two worlds together. And it's like an interesting challenge, especially because they're not like all like full color, and I'm used to there's certain things I know I lean on the color for, so I don't have to like do it in the illustration. So
Mm.
now like realizing certain things where it's like, oh man, I kind of slacked off in upping this game because the colors took that place. But sounds like it's yeah, it's a fun it's like a whole project's like a fun experiment
Mm.
that thankfully you get paid for.
Well, the beauty of like doing art the way that you're talking about, or the way you do it specifically, is that like there are parts of, if you're penciling and then hand off to an inker, there might be things that you would include that you would have to because you can't intuit that they will know what you intended, right? Same with coloring.
Yeah.
So like if it's all in your head about what the finished thing is supposed to look like, you can skip some of those extraneous steps that you would have to put in place to let someone else carry on. So that way, at least it simplifies things, or at least streamlines them.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Cool. Well, it was great talking with you, Paris. Thank you so much for being on.
Oh man, I'm glad we're able to make it work.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry about yeah, we had a crazy windstorm and we were without power for about a day. And then like 2 or 3 days later when we'd rescheduled, it was flicking on and off throughout the day because the wind had picked up again. It feels like you realize that some of this climate change stuff is becoming a reality when you see like storms like this happen more and more over the years. So
Oof.
it's making being on the East Coast a little like it's fine. Like I love it here, but every once in a while you get one of those days that just reminds you that it's like, well, we still have a long ways to go.
Mm.
Yeah,
I mean, I think I'm glad we were able to find time. Like either, like today worked.
perfect.
Uh, yeah, so I'm happy we figured it out.
Awesome. Well, if you're ever down this way, let me know, and I'll drop you a line up in Toronto. But otherwise, look forward to seeing what's next.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Beautiful. Have a good day.
yeah. You too, man.
Bye
Let's see.
bye. That was a fun one. That was a good one. Paris is certainly a creative chap, and has created some amazing work for a ton of different companies, and it continues to have an amazing output. So definitely make sure to check out his stuff. It's out there. We talk about it on the show. Fantastic work, and make sure to pay attention because he's certainly one of those people that we're going to be seeing a lot of in the years to come, I'm sure. Fantastic artist and a really cool guy. Anyway, tune in next week to our next episode, as we are now doing them weekly every Monday. And this episode will be with Craig Miller, who is a producer of films. He did a lot of marketing on films, or early marketing on a lot of huge films, like Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Return to Oz, The Wicker Man, The Thing, The Hitcher, a lot of cool stuff, a lot of big movies, Excalibur. There's more that I can't even name them all. There's so many, but certainly a guy that has achieved a lot in the marketing side of things. That eventually transitioned as a writer, did a lot of writing for animation, and a lot of great stories. He does have a book out, which is My Star Wars Memories, which is available on Amazon and all the various platforms. We talk about it on the show, but it might help you or behoove you a little bit to check that out if you get a chance between this and that. If not, you'll definitely want to check it out after you hear my talk with him. So, Craig Miller, producer, marketing guru, if you will, and writer, yeah. And he has a lot of great stories about like marketing some of these cult favorite movies as they are now, as he did back in the day. So it was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it a lot, just as much as I enjoyed my one with Paris here in this episode as well. So. Make sure to tune into that, and yeah, if you haven't already, like, subscribe, and rate what I'm doing here, because that always helps in getting more eyes on the product. And if you're enjoying this, hopefully you can help some other people enjoy it. Tell a friend, put it on your socials, get it out there. That's what we do. I am also part of the United Federation of Podcasts. It's a podcast group that have a bunch of different things. We got horror podcasts, some other movie podcasts, some other fun stuff like that. The X-rated one I mentioned at the beginning of the show is part of it. Bunch of content there. You can check it out at the United Federation of Podcasts. On social media, it's all there. Also on the website, so you can link to all the various different shows that are part of our network, and they're all doing great work. Very fun stuff. So my co-host on the X-Rated podcast, Davin, is over on the Hold Up podcast and a few Star Trek podcasts. So yeah, it's a good show. They do a lot of great stuff, and I'm digging everything they're putting out. So yeah, you may too. So go check out the United Federation of Podcasts and see if it's for you. I know it's for me. And if I'm for you, then they'll be for you too. If you can follow all that. Anyway, make sure to tune in a week's time, and I'll catch you then. The Graphic Histories Podcast is a proud partner of the United Federation of Podcasts.